So everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Noel Collins. I am Policy Officer at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So today what I wanted to do really was give you a flavour of what sort of West Yorkshire looks like in 2038 if we achieve our ambition to become a net zero carbon region by 2038. That's based on piece of work that the Tyndall Centre did for us to set that 2038 target, and is very much in line with sort of equitable shares of emissions as allocated through the sort of Paris Climate Agreement. What I'm going to try and do is give you a flavour in the round of what West Yorkshire adds up to from a place perspective over the next sort of 10 minutes. So it won't just touch on transport, it'll touch on sort of other areas as well. But it all adds up to the whole of the place that West Yorkshire could be if we achieved what we're trying to get to. So I should say this work is based on, what I'll talk to you about is based on a piece of work we've been doing and still underway with consultants Element Energy to understand the different pathways that we need to take to get to that 2038 ambition. I won't say much more on that other than if you go to the West Yorkshire Combined Authority's website, you will find lots more information on the study and its key findings. The technical report is on there if you want to go into the detail, but there is a summary document on there as well. So if I go to the sort of first slide, so in 2038, what does West Yorkshire look like? Well, it looks like a region which has reduced its emissions to virtually zero by 2038. So what does that mean? That means that we go from our current pre-COVID levels, I'll just add into that, emissions of 11.1 megatons of CO2 equivalents, down to virtually zero. I say virtually zero because we do have some residual emissions still remaining in those hard to decarbonise sectors. So what does that mean? It means that we go from contributing 31% of Yorkshire and Humber emissions, 4% of England emissions, down to virtually 0%. From the point of view of how the makeup of West Yorkshire's emissions at the moment, as you can see from the chart on the right hand side, transport is our highest emitting sector, so it's 44% of regional emissions. Buildings is just slightly behind that. From a transport perspective, it's dominated by road transport. Don't think that would come as any surprise to anybody who is joining this webinar today. So that is the big picture really, from the point of view of where we need to get to. What I wanted to do next was sort of look at transport. So from a transport perspective, what does getting to virtually zero emissions by 2038 mean? Well, it means that we'll have achieved a rapid modal and technology shift within the transport sector. So let's unpick that in a little bit more detail. So what our study has sort of suggested is that we won't be trying to curtail people's travel too much. It's roughly, with the scenarios that have been modelled, is likely to be around the same levels, a little bit less, a little bit higher, depending on which pathway that you look at. But we're not talking about massive expansion or massive reduction on the levels of travel that have been done. What is different is the modes here. That's the real key point here to just make. We won't be travelling by private car as much. In fact, we're saying that car use will be down by 21% as a minimum. You know, that's the lowest sort of point that's been modelled. It could be higher depending on that. Obviously, private cars, I've just said, reduces. What sort of fills that gap? Well, a lot more active travel is a really key one here. So what we'll be doing, we'll see an increase of 78% on pre-COVID levels from a walking perspective. But also, and this is the really eye-opening one, is over 2,000% increase in cycling over our pre-COVID levels. So massive infrastructure challenges there, but massive opportunity to get people out of their cars and doing a lot more sort of active travel measures, and that is based on sort of travel patterns of work, how people are travelling around West Yorkshire and the distance that they're travelling. So it's sort of picking up on the distances and sort of apportion it according to that distance information. We also need to see our public transport system increase the share of passengers as well. So we think distance through bus and also our trains, something like 39% on the buses, 53% on the train increases. So where the private car is reducing, we're expecting some of that slack to be picked up by our public transport networks. And obviously that has huge implications as well. Technology is going to be a big part of this, so big transition away from diesel petrol to electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, and in some cases, especially in the HGV sector, biomethane as a sort of transition fuel as well. And then the final point on this is around maintaining these COVID-19 levels of home working and teleconferencing to make sure that we aren't all sort of getting back in our cars and going back to you know, doing a lot of commuting, the emissions from that, home working, teleconferencing, and the digital infrastructure that needs to facilitate that are going to be increasingly key within West Yorkshire. So the next one I wanted to go on to was to talk about our buildings, obviously connected. What we need to see from our buildings perspective is to make sure they are energy efficient, they are low carbon, but they also, and this is particularly important for our buildings when we're thinking about new builds, is about reducing the need to travel in the first place. So the headlines that you see there around sort of the retrofitting of nearly 700,000 homes. So we have just over 1 million homes within West Yorkshire, and we need to retrofit nearly 700,000 of them. No small task in itself. So we need to make sure they have high levels of thermal efficiency, lots of loft insulation, cavity insulation, those types of things. We need to couple that with installing a range of low carbon heating systems, so making sure we've got heat pumps, we've got hydrogen boilers, we've got district heat. Not wedded to a particular approach when it comes to heating systems within West Yorkshire at this moment in time. It will very much be dependent on policy decisions that are made at a higher level than West Yorkshire, up at sort of national level, really. Give you some idea of the scale of change. Now, ambitious scenario, we're talking about over 600,000 heat pumps having to be installed. To put that into context, we have around about 1,800 systems installed within West Yorkshire at this moment in time. Huge expansion and opportunities that actually presents. Our homes will generate, and our buildings, come to say, will generate a lot of renewable energy, mainly through rooftop solar. So around 171,000 of our homes will have solar panels and be generating their own energy on those. And then the key one really is around building our homes and our new developments closer together. So bringing those services and amenities in much more close proximity to the homes that we're actually building. If we move on to sort of the power sector, so what we'll see in 2038 is the generation of much more renewable electricity. So a lot of the pathway, well, a number of the pathways that we've modelled look at a huge increase in sort of the electrification of different systems and processes. So what that means is that we'll obviously have a greater reliance on that sort of electricity side of things. West Yorkshire is never going to be an island when it comes to the generation of electricity. It's never going to cover off its needs. So what that means is we will rely on sort of the national grid to predominantly provide that electricity demand. However, what we'll see as a region, as West Yorkshire, is increases in solar and onshore wind. So you're talking about going with solar, particularly going from 12 megawatts installed at the moment up to 318 megawatts by 2038. You see similar sort of shifts with onshore wind, although not as much as the solar side of things, and then contributing to this wider decarbonised national electricity grid for the UK, really, coupled with sort of storage technologies and those types of things. And then finally, skip too far. just talking about our land and what our land is actually doing for us within 2038. So it's delivering not just carbon sequestration benefits, but it's delivering a range of other sort of benefits around health and well-being, those types of things. So what it's also doing is helping to offset difficult to reduce emissions from other sectors. So from a transport perspective, regardless of how hard we push on we still think there's going to be some diesel and petrol cars that are running around within West Yorkshire by 2038. So land could help to offset those emissions while the sort of churn through of stock happens sort of on that sort of replacement cycles and those types of things. Minimum number of 170 sort of hectares of woodland to be planted. We think that's very, very conservative, but is very dependent on land use decisions and those types of things. Our peatland, obviously, as I say there, needs to be in good condition from the carbon sequestration side of things. Again, helps to offset emissions from other sectors, as does the tree planting side of things. And all this really adds up to the sum of making the places within West Yorkshire better places to sort of live and work. So I think that really sums up sort of and gives you a flavour of vision for what West Yorkshire looks like in 2038. Obviously, as I say, there's much more information on the pathways work that we've done on our website, and I'd recommend anybody goes and have a look at that if there is interest. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Noel. I'd